Welcome to Pods with Posh and Pool, a podcast designed to inspire and challenge listeners through story, experience and insight. To face adversity, learn from suffering and discover how to embrace life with a heart filled with love and gratitude. We are so thrilled to have you journey with us and can't wait to share your stories. Join Sue O'Callaghan and Joanne Webb as we disrupt the theory that everyone has perfect lives.
So Jo, today is really exciting because I'm going to interview you today about your story and tell all our listeners out there, Jo's, a little bit about her background, what she's doing now with her life, and inspire you all with an amazing story. So currently you are working as a life coach.
Yep.
And you are inspiring people on their journey through finding self-love, which is something we've talked about on many of our podcasts, isn't it?
Yeah.
Self-love, and you're coaching people through the journey. You're a fitness instructor. I know that most of Devonport, where we live in New Zealand, know you. They've come to your classes or fee you because of your classes. So let's just unwind a little bit and start at the very beginning.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about your journey that you've been on, because we can't instruct others or coach others unless we've walked that journey ourselves. So how have you walked that journey to find a place of self-love?
Well, I found self-love and proper true self-love probably around about the age of 37, 38. So that's when I properly found it. And I had a bit of a light bulb moment. I was in a very, very toxic relationship, my second marriage. It was quite abusive, very abusive. And as the saying goes, we will only allow somebody to abuse us as much as we abuse ourselves. Yeah. And it got to the point where the abuse was more. And I was thinking, surely these things that I'm being told are not true about me. And no matter how bad we feel about ourselves, I did always have a clear feeling that I was a good person.
Yeah.
And so I probably always clung on to that. You know, I thought I always try my best. I always try and do the right things by other people. I always try to treat people how I'd like to be treated. So I knew deep down that I was a good person, even though I was being told constantly that I wasn't a good person and I was extremely flawed, etc. But within that also, I was really mean to myself. So even though I knew I was a good person, I was very, very cruel to myself. So the words I spoke to myself, the voices that were in my head were really degrading and really mean. You know, I thought I was fat and ugly and disgusting, and I just felt really wretched about myself, and I didn't feel like I was good enough. I didn't feel like I was doing enough and being a good enough person.
So you're really in a place of low self-esteem, low self-worth.
Yeah.
And you say it's the second failed marriage.
Well, it wasn't failed at the time, but obviously it was going in that direction. But I had almost a light bulb moment. You know, it was almost a live or die situation, and it wasn't very pleasant. But within that, I remember sitting on the sofa, and it was late at night, maybe early hours in the morning, and it was really dark, and it was really dark within me as well as outside. And I just thought, Joanne, you cannot hate yourself for a moment longer. Life is just passing you by. Life is too short, and why are you doing this to yourself? You know, I love people and I love what they bring to the table, and I love how different everybody is. And I was thinking, surely I can't be that different from everybody else. I must be nice like them. So,
and clearly that's a light bulb moment, isn't it? Because you're able to say, Joanne, why are you doing that to yourself? Because many people will be in a situation saying, I'm being abused, I'm in an unhealthy relationship, he's not meeting my needs, he this, and it would be blame. But obviously you're in a place where you took... you empowered yourself to say you were doing this to yourself. So then at that stage you must have realised you were able to change.
Absolutely. And for me, I literally made a decision there and then. I'm not gonna be mean to myself anymore. I'm going to love myself. And I was very, very adamant that that's what I was going to do. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I had no idea how I was going to do it. But I literally went out there then and got every bit of information I could. I was reading books, you know, and I've always read self-help books and things like that anyway. But, you know, you can read them and you can understand them, but you don't necessarily absorb them and you don't live by them. Yeah. It's a very different situation, but I lived them, I breathed them, and I did all the exercises, and I basically did it all on my own. And lots of people can't do that, and I understand that.
And that's a really critical stage to get to, though, isn't it? Because you can be aware that you need to create change, but as you say, you didn't know how that was going to take shape. You didn't know what you were going to do, but you put yourself out there, and you basically went to find all the help that you could in all sorts of different areas. So for listeners that are in a difficult situation, or maybe aware they need to create change in their lives, where do they start? You're just saying, just try everything.
Absolutely. And the seed was planted with me, and there was that little tiny grit. We talk about the pearl growing.
Yeah.
I had the grit, and I knew I needed to do it, and I knew if I didn't do it, something really
and
bad was
push
going
had
to
come
happen.
to shove.
Yeah,
really.
absolutely.
It was a critical moment, wasn't it?
It was a really critical moment. And so, as I say, I went and read the books, I did the exercises, I spoke nicely to myself, I retrained my brain. We all know now with neuroplasticity, our brains can be retrained. They're not just this muscle or organ in our head, whatever.
Yeah.
They can be retrained, and as can all the brain waves. And whenever the nasty voice came in my head, it was like, no, thank you, I'll put that to one side. And I literally had to say nice things to myself over and over and over again. And this is what I teach people, these kind of tools. I was saying I love you, I am enough. I was listening to TED Talks, I was listening to podcasts. I was just doing everything I possibly could, hours and hours a day, whenever I could. But I stuck with it as well. It wasn't just a 5-minute phase. I know that it takes 21 days to create a good habit, so I stuck with it. And then 21 days wasn't enough, so you keep going. And it was mainly the words I was using on myself. That was the biggest factor for me.
And I know you, so I know you live by those words. I know that positivity and being in gratitude and being aware that you've got choice is such a big part of your life.
Yeah.
But if we go back then, if we rewind, because often a lot of the things that we are trying to deal with today go back to childhood. Tell us a bit about your childhood and what the feelings you had. Were you aware that you had low self-esteem, or were you aware that the triggers or situations in your childhood that then led to that stage in adulthood where you thought, right, I need to actually now love myself?
Yeah, I think, everything always will stem back to childhood, I think, because that's where the building blocks are made. And, I've got lovely parents. I've got an amazing mum. I've got a wonderful stepdad. He's been in my life for 30 years. My dad is a bit of a wanderer, and, and things have happened there. But they dealt with life from their toolbox that they had from their experiences. And mum was one of the mums who taught me to read and do maths, and so I was, me and my sister both went to school really smart. However, she wasn't really overly huggy, overly lovey, and that's just where she was. We're a real huggy family now. It's funny later on in life how it comes round, but I probably didn't have my love language spoke to me. We all know, there's the 5 love languages. And one of mine is physical touch, and the next one is words of affirmation. So I need to be touched, I need to be told I'm loved. But perhaps I didn't get enough of that. I don't know. I'm not putting the blame anywhere, because as I say, I had
it's a journey of discovery.
Absolutely, and my mum. I knew my mum loved me.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between knowing it and being told. So there's all there's them kind of things, and this is not a blame game. These are just the facts and figures. But then my dad went to prison when I was 11, and that was obviously a real tough thing. There's a stigma within school because I wasn't from that kind of neighbourhood where there was many parents in prison. It wasn't like that, so I was one of the only kid in school who had to go and visit her.
And we don't want to be different, do we? We don't want to stand out. We want to fit in.
No, we don't want to be different. But even throughout school, I didn't fit in because I didn't want to be part of the popular kids, because the popular kids weren't very nice to the nerdy kids. I didn't really fit in with the nerdy kids because I didn't do enough schoolwork. But I wasn't mean to them either, and I'm calling them names like that, but that's how they were labelled when we were young, do you know what I mean? And I don't really like labels like that. And I wasn't particularly super sporty, but I could play sports. So I didn't really fit into any crowd either. But therefore that brought a lot of loneliness, because I wanted to be nice to everybody, and I couldn't understand why everybody just couldn't be nice and get along.
Which is an amazing message to our teenagers. We have lots of teen listeners and followers. You're actually talking about identity. How do you find your identity at that age when you're influenced by so many different cliques and groups? At school, it's actually very hard, isn't it?
It is. It's really hard to fit in, and lots of people don't enjoy school because it's mainly from the social aspect. I loved learning. I loved my classes. So I actually love the education side of it. I thrived, and I still thrive on learning to this very day. But friendships were a real struggle for me, and just because I just couldn't be faithful to one group, because I liked lots of people. And now I look at my life and my diverse group of friends, and they all come together and they like each other because I'm the common denominator. But I still to this very day, I want everybody. I'm friends with so many different kinds of characters.
And it's a very different situation from being at school, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you and I between us have got 8 children, 8 teens, late teens, and they're all gorgeous children, but I think in their own way they also have struggled with friendships and finding their place in school.
Yeah.
And our message through that is to say to teenagers, when you leave school, it's completely different.
It is.
Life doesn't follow that pattern. There are good and bad people wherever you go,
Yeah.
and there's toxic people, and there's
Totally.
people that bring love, but it's not as hard as it is when you're at school.
No, and
it's
also
a hard period in your life.
because we start to know ourselves more as we get older, and we start to be more confident within ourselves, and we realise that actually it wasn't our problem when we were younger. It was just the problem that probably actually everybody was
Yeah.
feeling, even
Yeah.
if they were secure in a group of friendships. I'm sure
Yeah.
lots of them, and we obviously help lots of teenagers between us now as well. We know that the angst and the stress and the anxiety is all there within pretty much a majority of them, isn't there? So yeah, it's just really tough years. And then obviously from my dad going to prison when I was 11, you know, you're in that transition stage at 11, aren't you? You're not a child,
Mm-hmm.
you're not a teenager. It's a real tough years anyway. And then my mum and dad split up when I was 12, and dad comes out of prison, he doesn't have a job, he's in a severe depression. And mum didn't really know this, and it wasn't the time of, you know, there wasn't many people who had parenting orders in place and stuff, so mum just thought it was the nicest thing to let me go and see dad whenever I wanted. But that in itself brought huge pressures on both me and my sister, because we felt like we needed to go there and be dad's entertainer, we needed to be his carer, we needed to be his parent. So pretty much from the age of 12 I turned into a parent.
All the while you're still trying to find your identity as a
Absolutely.
child.
Had no idea who I was, what I wanted, and had this huge level of responsibility on my shoulders. And, you know, was cooking dinners, doing the ironing, and actually that bit was fine. I didn't care about the practicalities. It was more the emotional stuff that affected me, you know, trying to bump up your parent, trying to be there for them, trying to be their person. That's not your job at that age. It's nobody's job. And, you know, you look at these kids all around the world, and there's tons of children in that situation. And don't get me wrong, what doesn't kill you does definitely make you stronger. However, I've had to do a lot of healing about that time, because it was really, really tough. But you don't realise how tough it is when you're in it, because you're just surviving.
And I
that's
love
your
the
life.
way you use the word healing, because we're healing all our lives, aren't we? We were talking earlier about various layers of healing that we need to do. And certainly, you know, all of us need to go back into those childhood years and teen years and just look at aspects of our lives that where needs weren't met, or we were lonely, or we felt rejected, or you clearly had a rescuing mentality, you wanted to go and make it better for people. And that's very healthy and very normal. But when it becomes unhealthy and your needs aren't being met, or you're finding yourself lost on your own journey, that's when I think we need to find help, isn't it?
Absolutely. And of course, you know, as I say, I didn't know my life was any different than anybody else's at the time. You just put one foot in front of the other, you just get on with it, you just do it. And then of course, then I hit the teenage years, and then I was like a textbook case. I went looking for love in the wrong places, and unfortunately I was one of the really, really, really unfortunate ones that gets pregnant pretty much the first time they ever have sex. And I was just 14. So not only was I pregnant, I was actually just too young to be having sex. I was too young to be having those kind of relationships. I was too young emotionally, even though my maturity levels, I appeared to be more mature because of everything I'd been through. I look back now, and on a psychological level,
14 is so young.
So
I'm still
young.
a child.
And I so wish I'd been more protected.
Yeah.
And then, you know, going through that and then keeping it a secret for weeks, and that shows how I wasn't mature, because I couldn't tell people, and I kept it a secret. You know, I told a friend, that friend went and blabbed to the school, so I had to lie to people then to their face. People like, oh, you're pregnant? I'm like, no, absolutely not, kind of thing. But you know, and then I had to, obviously then I did tell my mum, and my mum was absolutely amazing, you know, hugged me, did what she could, you know, just stood by me. But then I had to, I left it so late that I had to go through a hideous labour, because I was like 14, 15 weeks pregnant by the time I had my termination. And really that destroyed me.
Yeah, it would at age 40. I mean, that destroys anybody, any woman at any stage of life. But at 14, that's a very young age to cope with that.
Yeah.
So tell us what happened then at that really critical stage.
Well, then I probably, after that, you know, I come out of hospital, and then nobody wants to talk about it because it's done and dusted.
And the communication was different in those days, wasn't it?
And the
just
nurses
shows
were
now how important the communication is.
When I was in hospital, people were not nice to me. You know, the nurses were not nice. It was just like, oh God, she's got herself in that mess. And that's what I felt. And I feel people's emotions. I'm an empath. I'm highly sensitive. And I could feel the distaste oozing out of most of the medical staff at the time. And you think, that's not what people need. People don't need judgment. People don't need that kind of opinions put on them. It's so awful. You know, you're in a caring profession. Surely you should just care for people regardless, or just don't do the job, because you're not doing any good when you put that kind of feelings and emotions onto other people.
Isn't that interesting now that you're in a place where you've found self-love? I think when you find self-love, then you are so much more loving of others and compassionate of others. And compassion is such a huge part of our life, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And the critical thing that you needed then, and you know now that you needed then, was compassion. You needed people to hold you in love without any judgment, without any condemnation, and just hold you. And for our listeners out there, you know, find those people around you that are compassionate. And we talk a lot about having toxic relationships, and be aware of those relationships around you, because it's not just in professional situations. I mean, there is toxic relationships everywhere, isn't there?
Absolutely.
Put yourself in healthy situations with people around you that are compassionate, are care.
Yep.
Which is clearly what you needed at the time. So that's a huge journey to go on, isn't it? From you know, your parents splitting up, your father being in prison, and then being in a relationship where you have to have a termination at such a young age. So then how did you progress from there? Did you have a period of depression? How did you deal with that at the time?
I probably started suffering from depression probably a year later, but maybe I was kind of a bit down from that moment on. But then every year round about the time I had the termination, and when I knew the baby should have been born, it brought up huge emotions for me every year. And of course I had nobody to talk to about it. And then that probably led me on the road to depression. And I think I literally suffered, I think I suffered from depression on and off for 20 years. And it manifested different all the time.
I was going to say, how did it manifest? Was it the inability to get out of bed? Was it self-hatred? How did that manifest in you?
No, well, I've never not got out of bed, ever. I've never not dressed nice. I've never not put my makeup on. Do you know what I mean? It just, so from the outside, people didn't know I was depressed. I didn't look depressed. You know, I'm always the life and soul of the party. But it was what it was doing to my insides. And yeah, just wasn't very nice to myself. Everything was a struggle. And I've never been a negative thinker either. So it's really bizarre, because when you're in depression, often everybody's really negative. It didn't really affect me like that. I was just more negative about me than the outside world. And as I say, everything was a struggle. And then, you know, I was having my children at this time as well. Well, you know, I got married very early. I got married age 21, and I started having my children age 23. And, you know, love them to pieces, but it was pretty tough work, you know, having 3 children under 4. You know, and then we left it a couple of years before we had our 4th child. And within that time, we were moving all around England. Then we emigrated over to New Zealand. So there's a lot going on in life within that 20-year period. From like teenage, you know, up to like 35 odd. It's lots and lots of stuff going on. And of course, as a mother, as a wife, you're responsible for everything pretty much, aren't you?
And your instincts are to protect what you've got,
yeah,
and to put your needs last.
Absolutely.
We know as mothers, and I'm sure many mothers listening are actually hearing that and saying, actually, I don't spend much time taking care of my needs.
No, I didn't take care of my needs for so many years. Like, I opened a business because my husband wanted to own a business. I ended up owning 2 businesses that, yeah, don't get me wrong, it was a huge learning curve for me, and I got lots of lessons out of it. It wasn't my dream. And as you say, it's our natural instinct to protect, to nurture. And I protected my children, but I also protected my husband, you know, and supported him on his career path. As I say, we moved around England, we moved around the world. That was all for his job progression. And each time, you know, you're having to build a new community, a new network of friends, settling your children in. And so being depressed had to almost take a back burner, which is a good thing, I suppose, but neither did I ever get over any of the trauma that I'd had.
So do you think, looking back on it, you were aware at the time you were depressed? Or was it only now, looking back, you think you were actually depressed at the time? But other people maybe didn't know that you were depressed?
No,
you kept it hidden?
I kept it quite hidden, but I did have bouts within that time when I had antidepressants. And of course, because I was having children, people were checking. I was diagnosed with postnatal depression after 2 of the children. And then, you know, some doctors would just, I'd go in and just go, bleh. And that would just actually make me feel better. They wouldn't put me on antidepressants. It depends which GP you kind of had at the time as well. Some of them wanted to do the whole cognitive talking and behavioural therapy things. And and that was really helpful, because that's sometimes what you just need. You just need to offload and get it all out, because we hold so much within us.
And clearly you're overseas, your mother's not here, your immediate family are not here to take care of you, and you're probably giving in all areas of your life, to your husband, to your children, and you're not actually being nurtured yourself or being held, which is what we often do, isn't it? When we live in we live in a global society, we're travelling, we're away from our community, and we're doing so much on our own. And you're such a doer, aren't you? You're so capable. That I imagine you just carried on and did as much as you could.
Well, I was I was on PTAs, I was the chairperson, I was the treasurer, I was helping out at charity events, I was organising charity events, I was speaking at charity events. But always within that time, I always felt I needed to be more.
Yeah.
It's like being a mother. I look back now and I so wish I'd loved myself, because I would have been so fulfilled as a mother. And that totally breaks my heart, really, because I think I was always trying to do something else, study and do more. And actually, I missed out on some of that enjoyment, which is the hardest thing. But I don't, I've got the most amazing kids now, so I enjoy every freaking moment with them. You live and learn your lessons, but...
And what an amazing place to be now, because some people don't do that in their lives, and we get, as you and I say, there's only one thing guaranteed in life: we're all going to die.
Absolutely.
And many people get to that place without realising the beauty of who you are. And what I love about you is that you're so positive and you do love yourself, and therefore you're so inspiring to others because of that journey you've been on. And you're infectious. People want to find out who they are and love themselves because they can see the benefits of what you've done for yourself. But that's a hard, lonely journey, isn't it? And I think even in the best of all marriages, we as women and men as well, but I speak for women because I am a woman, we can be very lonely in a relationship, and we're carrying everybody's problems and situations. We are responsible for them, but actually we don't think about ourselves. And so
it's definitely to our detriment, because I'm a huge advocate about self-care and self-love. Well, while we're not taking care of ourselves, I mean, look what ended up happening to me. I spiraled so out of control that I did end up having a nervous breakdown when I was 35. And I remember one day, I can laugh about it now and it's really not funny, but I just remember standing at the kitchen island and I opened a drawer that had all the mugs in, and I literally bent over and I could not get out of the drawer. So I'm this person who always got dressed, as I said, always went to work, always dropped the children off, I was always at extracurricular activities. Yet this one day, I could not get out of the drawer. I literally had my hand on the breakfast bar, my head in the drawer, and I couldn't get out. And I remember my first husband, the children's father, looking at me going, "What are you doing?" And all the kids looked really alarmed. And normally, of course, I'd be upbeat and I'd try to make everything okay, and so the children weren't upset. I just couldn't. I didn't have it in me at this time. I just literally stood there and had my head in the mugs, and I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And then I went to a really amazing GP who sent me to a psychiatrist because they thought maybe I was bipolar, because I was having huge highs and massive lows, but that is actually part of my personality anyway. How manic I can get and how crazy and big bold
and
personality.
I think that's being a gregarious, passionate person, isn't it, in who you are?
Yeah, but anyway, the psychiatrist went, "Nope, you do not have bipolar. You are just currently having a depressive episode." And from then on, I took antidepressants for 1.5 years, and I think then a lot of things changed within me. That was a big shift. You look back and you can see big moments in your life, and within that, I probably realised that's when I wasn't no longer in love with my husband, which of course brings along guilt and upset and shame, because I got married for life at 21. I had the fairy tale, that's what I wanted. I had these 4 beautiful children.
And we do, don't we? I mean, how many people would get married and say, well, actually, I knew I was only going to get married for 2 years or 5 years. You don't. You get married for life.
And I thought I was nailing it, 14 years later, I was still married. Yeah. And to me, that felt like a real achievement. And I thought we were going to be one of those couples that grew old together. But unfortunately, things happen in life. I'd moved all around the world for him. I'd moved all around the country for him. And it was for him. I mean, I know he was the breadwinner, so he's seen it as doing it for us. But ultimately, there was some moves that didn't need to happen. But I did it, and I made the best of it. And then, obviously, we moved here, and we set up the businesses, and I'm trying to run 2 businesses, deal with 4 children, still clean the house, still provide healthy meals. And something just had to give, and we weren't parenting together at the time. Our children had gone from being small to then having more emotional needs. And I just couldn't do it anymore.
And there's a really powerful message, I think, in there, because you talk about how everything was spiraling out of control, and you said it was to the detriment of you. But within that, if you're not okay, nor's anybody else.
No.
So it's actually to the detriment of everybody else, isn't it? And the message again to our listeners is, you know, if you as the parent, the sole carer or the joint carer, are not okay, nor your children. So the vital message is to take care of yourself, not just for yourself, but for everybody else.
Yeah.
If you're holding it all together.
And then, of course, I thought then I was taking care of myself, because I thought, right, I'll get out of the marriage, and then, you know, and good things did come from that, and lots of bad things. You know, then I was dragged through a 4-year family court battle. But from leaving the marriage, I no longer had depression. It's as if something was lifted from me, and I got through that side of my mental illness.
And did you find then you started a different journey? Could you begin a journey of recovery because you weren't in the relationship, or was that a sort of kick-starting point to transition you into a different place? Because, I mean, you leave a relationship, it doesn't mean everything's over. Then you're struggling on your own as a single parent, it just brings different problems. Where were you at that time?
Well, it catapulted me into another relationship, didn't it? And we know that that relationship didn't end up very well. So even though from that moment on I no longer had depression, I thought I was stronger because I'd obviously had the courage to leave the marriage, which made me feel quite strong. But at the time, I actually had probably the lowest self-esteem. I was really mean to myself. Who will want me? I'm 35. You know, hadn't been naked in front of another man for many years. Didn't feel like I was in the best shape of my life. I was like, oh my God, who is going to want me? And, you know, the kids are all loud and crazy. I am not an attractive package. And that's how I felt about myself.
And that's a fear-based position you're coming from, isn't it?
Scarcity, fear, you know, who's going to want me? Very self-destructive. As I say, no self-worth, no self-esteem. But then, of course, somebody did want me. This guy comes along who's very, very charming, very nice, telling me how beautiful I was. And, you know, I hadn't heard that for years. My husband hadn't told me how much he loved me or how gorgeous I was
and
for years.
Charming
because
for you and I now does ring alarm bells, doesn't it?
We're like that. We're running a mile if we hear anybody's charming. But, you know, I hadn't been told that for many years. And then all of a sudden somebody's there telling me how gorgeous I am, how beautiful I am. How they want to spend time with me, how they want to take on my 4 children. It was like music to my ears. I was in hook, line and sinker, but it wasn't just that, you know, as you said, my family at the other side of the world. And you know what happens when you leave a relationship. Often you lose your whole friendship groups because people don't know what to do. Do they go with him? Do they go with you? Or do they just not see any of you? And we live in a very small community, so literally everybody turned their back on me pretty much. You know, I thought I had this amazing group of friends. Boom, one day they've all gone. And the only person I've got to talk to is this one guy, really.
Who is magic to your ears at that time. And again, you know, for those of us that have been through a divorce situation or a major separation, I think we can identify with what you say, that it's difficult for friends, isn't it? And they often take sides. And at that point then, you not only have lost the relationship and the dreams that were attached to that relationship and the future that came with it, but to lose your friends then is often the thing that it's the icing on the cake, isn't it? That's the finishing crowning glory when you lose your friends as well.
And they obviously weren't agreeing with some of the choices I was making at the time, so I was probably behaving in a little bit more of a reckless way, because we do when we're in despair, we do behave a bit more recklessly. And you know, people have opinions whether you should leave marriages or not, and there's so many different dynamics. And again, I don't judge any of that anymore.
And that's again where we don't need judgment or condemnation. We need support. We need the compassion. We need friends to hold us where we're at, regardless of how we're behaving, because none of us choose to behave badly or in an erratic way or irresponsible way. We do what we can. We always do. I'm a firm believer. We do the best we can always in the circumstances that we're in, and nobody knows what goes on behind closed doors. It's not for us to judge, because you at the time were doing the best you could in the circumstances that you were in.
Totally, and this would have been another situation where I was spiraling a little bit out of control. You know, my foundations had all gone, everything's gone, and you're there just flailing, aren't you? And
taking what you can get as well. And if the one person that comes into your life is complimenting you, wants to spend time with you, then you take it.
Absolutely. And now though, I look back and, as I say, hook, line and sinker I was in, but we know how clever narcissists are. We've both had experience of narcissistic relationships. This is how they behave. They love bomb you, they do all of that stuff, but then ultimately it's a way to start controlling you, because they can see how vulnerable you are, and
so for
that's how they
a
grasp onto
listener
you.
that hasn't heard the term narcissism before, hasn't been in a narcissistic relationship, just tell us a little bit more about what that identifies as. It's a highly controlling relationship, isn't it?
Highly controlling. You know, they've got the hugest egos. They never do anything wrong. Everything's your fault. Even when it is their fault, they'll put a spin on it that it's your fault. They don't apologise. They don't take ownership of anything.
So
they
take
have
little
really
responsibility.
yeah.
There's very little communication.
They have
it's
huge
honest.
inflated egos. Say how amazing they are all the time. They almost brainwash you. Well, they definitely do try to brainwash you. And the control comes in very
subtle ways.
Subtly, yeah. It is subtle. And
so it's a serious form
messages.
of psychological abuse, isn't it? Where you actually then start to lose self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
You go on a downward spiral again. You start to hate yourself. You try and constantly improve the relationship. So you're constantly striving to make everything better while losing your self-esteem, losing your power.
Mm-hmm. You spend all your life or all the time that you're with them walking on eggshells.
And confused, I think, as well, because you don't understand what's going on because you've never been in a relationship like it before. So treading on eggshells is an amazing term because you don't know what's coming next, where you're going to be, but so confused as well because your mind's being played with, isn't it? So how did that, what took shape in that relationship then? Where did that
it happened
take you
real
to?
quick, obviously the partnership happened really quickly because I was relying on somebody.
So you moved into a relationship with him?
Pretty quick, yeah. And, he was always there for me. Seemed very nice at the time. Why wouldn't you? Then, life progresses. We try and blend our families and the children all seem to get on. But I'm just putting one foot in front of the other again and trying to live a life, and I've already broke one family up and now I've got this other new family, so you just carry on going, and all the meantime there's still things going on within the family court between me and my first husband,
which puts extra pressure on the relationship.
Absolutely.
And you talk about blended family. You were bringing 4 children into the relationship. Was he bringing children into the relationship?
He had a couple of children as well,
so
and one of them ended up moving up here and living with him permanently. So I had my children on a shared care basis. There was so many different dynamics happening. And of course, I had to sell one business that I'd had with my first husband, and life was just so mad and crazy. And then I took basically a year or 2 off working, and upon his insistence. But now I look back again, it's just another way to strip you. But it's like a way of, you could really do with some time off. You haven't had any time off in years. I think you really need to concentrate on yourself. And it sounded really, really, it was a nice package, but wasn't quite like that. And then, as I say, within that, I just realised things were not okay. I don't think I properly breathed for 5 years. Literally lived with tense shoulders, tension in my chest. Didn't see that at the time until you're out, but now I look back and I know that's exactly how it was. Walking on eggshells, trying to avoid problems before the problems happen. So you think, oh, I know if I do this, this and this, he's going to be happy. But then you do this, this and this, and all of a sudden the goalposts have changed, and actually he wants you to do 2 other things. You go, oh my God, where did they come from? They've just been totally blindsided. So then the next time something happens, you go, oh, well, I've done all of them and I've done some more, but no, that's not good enough. So it was getting ridiculous. But what happens in these kind of relationships, you might fall out once a month to start with, and it's not nice. But you think, oh, but then the rest of it's quite euphoric and it's good. But then you might fall out once a fortnight, then it's once a week. And then before you know it, you're having 4 bad days, 1 good day. But there is the odd good day thrown in to keep you coming back for more. And you want what it was like at the beginning of the relationship, so you stick with it thinking, well, it was good once, maybe it can be good again. It can never be good again.
So again, you're in that rescuing mentality.
Absolutely.
You're constantly thinking of ways to improve it, aren't you? And feeling shame and guilt because it's your fault, it's not working, it's not their fault.
Mm-hmm. And then also, having that huge guilt about splitting up yet another family and being told you're crap, you're useless, you're shit. And they'll tell you that you're amazing at something, but as soon as they don't like it, they take that away and they turn all of that against you. And that's when I, obviously within that time, which is crazy when I look back now, but that's when I started to love myself. No, fuck you. And
so in that relationship, it got to a place, it was so bad. One day you just took a look at the situation and just said, something's got to change.
Yeah. And I knew I had to be the responsible one. So within that, I was going on my journey to self-love. And within that journey to self-love, I actually thought I was being an amazing wife because I'm happier, I'm lighter. But of course, he could see he was losing control, so the abuse became worse. And it wasn't just emotional and psychological, it escalated. And I was, for the last 18 months of the marriage, I was either sleeping on the sofa or going to friends' houses. And it was really, I couldn't really do that the week I had the kids. So I was trying to keep the week that we had the kids, to an equilibrium and trying to be as nice as I could. And then the other week was just, shit, shocking, there's fights, there's all sorts. And then for the last 6 months of the marriage, I literally slept with my phone and my key in my hand the entire time.
Because you didn't feel safe.
Yeah, and I had a suitcase in the car. And I had this one bag of random belongings. And again, I laugh. It's not funny, but we have to laugh at these things. So I had this one bag. And you look around, you think, what's important if I have to go? And obviously, the first thing you're going to grab is your kids. It's a no-brainer. And then I had a suitcase, and the suitcase that I had in the car had a couple of pairs of underwear, maybe a gym outfit and one other pair of shoes. I thought, I can live with what I'm wearing and that. I can go between the two, that's fine. But I had this one random bag and had a colander in it. And
was that for anything in particular?
But because it belongs to my stepdad's mum and I inherited it, and it's broken, it got damaged in a dishwasher.
So you had it for sentimental value?
Absolutely. But to have this colander in my bag and this one ornament which my friend had sent me, which is supposed to represent me and my daughter, and a couple of other really random things. And I thought, and then I used to open the bag and see the colander, and it used to just make me laugh because I'd be thinking, I don't know, it's crazy how our mind
what
works.
makes me laugh about that is that we live in New Zealand, don't we? And so we live in Earthquake City, and so we're meant to all have in the back of our cars somewhere that ready to grab. We're meant to have an earthquake pack, and none of us do we? I've never had one. I've been here nearly 9 years. I don't have my earthquake pack with my radio because mobile phones won't charge, and your water and food supplies and everything else. But it shows how desperate you were then. Because we're meant to have earthquake packs, but actually what you had was a rescue pack ready to go any minute.
Oh, yeah.
Which shows the critical stage that you're at, doesn't it?
It is. It was very, very critical. And I truly believe if I'd stayed, well, I don't think I'd be here now. Put it
and
that way.
clearly you left. You left the relationship. You went on this incredible journey of finding self-love. And we sort of zoom it forward from then, which was how many years ago?
Well, I left just over 2 years ago now, but obviously the last 18 months I was kind of coming and going. So... But it's amazing because when I left that relationship, there was no thought about, oh my God, I'm fat, I'm ugly, I'm disgusting, nobody deserves me. I left that relationship empowered. And don't get me wrong, it was hideous and the way I had to leave. And that's probably another podcast. We'll do that another time. But, my boys stood by me. They were so supportive. My 2 older kids. I mean, all my kids are amazing, but these ones helped me move out, And I knew that I was just going to build a life for me and the children in the first year. Nothing else was going to be important. We just had to get our bond back. They had to trust me because I'd put them in that situation with that horrid person. But equally, I left thinking, we are freaking awesome. My kids are amazing. They are empathetic. They are loyal. They are supportive. They are hilarious. They are fun. They are loud. We are proud. And I thought, if anybody comes into my life, they have to be special. And my children have to like them because they are coming into one hell of an awesome package. We are a force to be reckoned with and we are amazing. And so you look back, then there's a 5-year difference there, And my first husband wasn't abusive and wasn't awful. We just had very different of opinions on certain things. And we'd been through quite a lot. But I left and I was really low. So I was ruining something as far as I was concerned. I was ruining a family unit and just wasn't in a great space. I never had been. I'd never, I'd not learnt those tools, that mindset. And there I was, I'd gone through, a couple of years of really working on myself, learning to love myself. And the difference when I left that second marriage, even though it was awful, and even to this very day, he tries to bring me down and he's still trying to destroy me. Nobody can now.
Because you're in a different place yourself.
Totally different
and
place.
I know you well, and I know 2 of your children really well. I've met all your children. They're gorgeous children, as you say, vibrant and lively and fulfilled in so many ways. And don't get me wrong, I've got 4 as well, so it's never an even keel. It's up and down as we go. But you're very clearly a very close unit, and I think we'll have many listeners who are frightened to leave a relationship that's abusive because they've got young children or they've got children. 2 children, 3 children, but we've managed with 4 children each. We've both come out of abusive relationships. The worry is obviously financial. Have I got time to have a job? Will my career ever take off again, or can it take off when it never has taken off? Can I earn money? And I think our message together is that the universe has always got our back.
Yeah.
And that we come back again and again. Our needs have always been met, and to have the courage. And then clearly you are so courageous. You're a very strong woman and so capable. And many of us aren't that strong. You're one of the strongest people I know, so you've done it. But at times of fear, when we think we can't do it, actually, we just have to make that choice, that decision. I deserve more. So tell us about what it really is like to find self-love. So, and how do we do it? Clearly you went in all sorts of different directions to find it, and you have found it. Where's the easiest place? Is there a quick remedy? Can I just go to one place and find it and receive it?
No, to be honest with you, I think the biggest thing is you have to want it. And this is what I say to all of my clients, and I'm pretty straight talking with them, whether they're teenagers or whether they're fully grown people. I say, it's a choice. And you know, my courses that I've designed, they're all called, you know, Your Life You Decide. And this is fact. This is your life. You decide how you're going to live it. So do you actually want to love yourself? And can you see the benefits? And, you know, when I talk about the benefits and I radiate what is so amazing about it, well, then I think people do kind of get on the bandwagon. They do want a bit of that. But ultimately, if you're going to fight it and you're going to believe that you don't really want it or you don't deserve it, well, it's never going to happen. You actually have to want it.
And are we just talking about being emotionally happy, or are we talking about all aspects of our life? Because I know you're big on fitness, and you know, one of the biggest things from really relationship is that we haven't spent time in fitness. We haven't been really focused on our diet. Lots of us could be really overweight and just not know where to start, because it seems overwhelming. Where do you start?
Well, to be honest with you, the first place is definitely self-love. Because when we get to a point where we love ourselves, everything else happens much easier. It's not, you know, like if you're trying to lose weight and you don't love yourself, it's an uphill battle, because you don't really think you deserve to lose that weight. You don't really think you deserve to look beautiful and gorgeous, and you can look beautiful and gorgeous at any weight, don't get me wrong, do you know what I mean? But if you're at a place where you're starting to like yourself, or if you have that little bit of belief in yourself, everything happens a bit easier. Like, I used to be an overeater, I used to be a emotional eater, so I've done, you know, I've ticked most of the boxes of what you can and can't do, and I've over-exercised. I've used exercise in an unhealthy way as well. You know, I used to thrash myself crazy and do loads of crazy stuff. And don't get me wrong, I do crazy stuff now, but I know what my body's capable of. But I think when you are in a place of self-love, you want to exercise because our bodies are made to exercise. We're not made to sit still. It's just not what we're here for. You want to give yourself good fuel, as in food and drink. And you don't actually really think about the bad stuff that you do. You know, like, I still eat cake, I'll still eat lollies, I'll still have a glass of wine, but I do everything in moderation. I can't eat cake every single day because I don't feel good.
So those people that are listening struggling with weight issues, who will say, I'll love myself when I can lose weight. I've first got to lose weight, then I'll love myself because I'll look different. You'd say it's the other way around.
Absolutely. I used to be a style consultant as well, so I used to help people with like what colours suited their skin tones and things like that. And some overweight people would come to me and I'd show them the colours, and I'd put these beautiful colour swatches up against them, and they could see that their face would radiate, and they'd say to me things like, oh, I'll go and buy that when I've lost some weight. And I go, no. You go and buy yourself a cheap t-shirt in this colour or something now. You don't have to spend a lot of money on it, but this colour looks amazing. Go and do it now. And you know what? They look in the mirror and they see that they radiate in whatever colour, and then they start to like themselves. And they go, oh, I could look beautiful. Look at me, I do. And therefore, then they start to lose weight easier. And you see, it's that whole, it's a cycle. But if we can just get something that we like about ourselves, and if we can start to love ourselves, everything happens in flow rather than in that, as I say, that scarcity, that fear mindset.
So Jo, clearly, I mean, your journey's been quite remarkable, hasn't it? And we've all got a story to tell. You and I have trained in public speaking through storytelling, and everybody out there will have a story to tell about their journeys and their lives. And I know many listeners will be struggling with various different situations and conflict and adversity right now. If you were to leave our listeners with one key tool to help them on their journey to find self-love, what would it be?
If they can just say to themselves over and over again, I am enough, I am enough, I am worthy, I am lovable. I still say them words to myself all the time, and they're my the three phrases that I leave with people. I am enough, I am worthy, I am lovable. And the more we tell ourselves something, the more we believe it, and it's true.
And it's a question of practicing until the thought becomes embedded and takes shape or grows within us.
And you might find somebody might say something to you one day or something, you think, oh no, I'm too good for that, I'm more worthy of that, or I'm enough, and the spark's there then, it's there. It's self-talk. It's all about changing those hideous self-talk patterns that we all can have, because we've all got that ego sitting there, and it's just retraining it to be kind. And be kind to yourself the way you would be kind to others. Speak to yourself the way you would speak to your best friend. Because if you spoke to your best friend the way you're speaking to yourself now, if you don't love yourself, you wouldn't have any friends.
I love that when you say that, because we can easily look at friends and say, why do they put up with that? We can see it so clearly from the outside, but then the question is, do I put up with that in myself?
Yeah, and to just ask yourself that question, say those 3 things to yourself: I am lovable, I am worthy, am I enough? But then when you are being mean to yourself, say, would I speak to my best friend like this? And the answer is pretty much no, because you wouldn't have any friends. So be kind to yourself. And then there is so much help out there. There's people like me and you. We help people all the time. There's inspirational podcasts, there's inspirational TED Talks. There's so many books on this subject. So if anybody wants any advice, then just feel free to write to us.
And you've got your own website.
I do, thehappinesshustler.com.
And clearly you're changing lives. You're doing lots of life coaching, and I know that you touch a lot of people's lives, and people are coming to you to find where can they start on that journey of finding self-love. And that comes only because you've walked the walk.
Yeah.
There's a lovely phrase I heard the other day, that you can only go as high as you've been low. So if you're in a low place in your life right now, take Joe as an inspiration. I'm so inspired by your journey. That's why I work with you. But also, I think, our listeners are going to get so much from the podcast today in terms of stay with it when it's tough. You stood with it. You found the means to find change. You took ownership of the situation. And even though, sometimes you can say you jumped out of the pan into the fire, you can exchange one set of problems for another. Do what you know you can do at the time. Take ownership, re-empower yourself, create change. And it's not necessarily a quick process, is it? But you've come to a place now where you do love yourself and empower yourself.
But the one thing I can say though is it can actually be a really quick change. Like and this is what I'm saying, if you truly want to love yourself, it doesn't have to take 2 years. Mine took me a couple of years because of where I was and the relationship I was in. And this is why I'm so passionate about working with teenagers, because if I can inspire one teenager to love themselves, imagine what journey they're going to have throughout their life, what their trajectory is going to be. I only have to change their life by 1 or 2% and they're going to go on a whole different path. And it's so inspiring to watch people to actually plant that seed and go, wow, yeah, I can actually love myself without being a Victoria's Secrets model. You know what I mean?
And it's wonderful to see that journey of transformation in someone else's life, isn't it? And I remember when I was trying to go through that place of transformation and change and healing, somebody once said to me, see, you could take 10 years to do this journey, or you could cut it down to 2 years or 1 year if you do it rapidly. And I just thought, I want to do it rapidly. I don't want to be in this situation for 10 years. So,
and I've been to see a coach before now, like I told you about my abortion. I carried that as physical pain around with me for 26 years, right? 26 years. Like, don't get me wrong, I wouldn't cry about it all the time. I was over my depression, but there was still that knot of pain in my stomach, in my ovaries, basically. And that's probably where the guilt and shame was, and the upset, and especially after I had my children, I knew how nurturing and loving I was. So to abort a baby just destroyed me. However, so I carried this physical pain around with me as well as emotional pain for 26 years. I had a 20-minute coaching session and I volunteered in front of a room of 120 people because that's the kind of girl I am. So I'm up on stage bawling. There is snot, there is tears. It is disgusting. It's just not nice. My ego was here going, Joanne, you can't cry. Stop crying. There's 120 people. But there was just something in me, and the words that the guy was helping me, and he was saying, and he regressed me back to being a child when I was going through the experience. And I forgave everybody. I forgave myself. I spoke to myself as a young girl, and I really forgave her. And from that 20-minute episode, I've not ever had any physical pain about that. So transformation can happen as quick as you want it to. If you believe, if you're going into it for the right reasons and it's something that you really want, it can happen. If you're going into it because somebody else wants you to, or with a shit-arse attitude, it's not going to happen. As simple as that.
And I love that journey because we all like the happy ending. We grew up with these romantic fairy tale stories, Enid Blyton stories, and the incredible stories of a happy ending. Yours is a happy ending, but it's not been easy along the way. So I think for our listeners, be inspired by Joanne today. And thank you so much for the courage you've taken to share your story, because you've done your work so you can help others. Shall we just leave listeners with those amazing words that you put out there?
Yeah, I am enough. I am worthy, I am lovable, and you are very much so. So go forth and conquer.
Joanne, thank you so much for taking the time to interview today.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being with us today. For us to inspire others to live their magnificently imperfect life, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or on your podcast app. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Pods with Posh and Pool. We can't wait for you to join us on our next episode. Love, light and peace.